everybody, how are you? Please excuse I think I look a bit scruffy. I'm not gonna lie. Had to do a TV interview before. Not gonna lie. My mum's given a load of clothes to charity and I thought I'll wear one of her charity tops even though it was too small for me because my mother's a size 6. But nevertheless, I made him film me from just up here and I breathed in a lot and tried to stop the rolls being available to the visual eye. But this is why I'm now wearing an old top. And it's so old that I think it's actually a bit see-through. It was nice in its day in 1986. So, if nothing, I'm thrifty. How are we all today? Obviously, you know what I'm like, chaps. Like to talk about the reality of presenting life right now. Still feeling a bit confused. Not sure what's going on out there. Seems to be a lot of discussions that people are still disagreeing with, even in the political versus the medical arena. And I've just decided to just give it all up and pretend it's not happening anymore. And I think for psychological well-being, that is a good thing. On one level though, they have banned Botox for the under 18s. I think that's a good idea, just going to say, you know, because I think injecting the under 18s with something that they're not really aware would be good for them potentially and might have long-term consequences might not be a good idea. So it's nice to see that there's some ethics about not injecting the under 18s with things like Botox, and also because they're perfect as they are. So that kind of cheered me up a little bit today. Well, I've got my tour starting on Thursday, so I'm only saying that now on the basis that I might not be here next Monday because I'll be in hospital after collapsing on stage through fear. Because I've preached feel the fear and do it anyway. You are only ever taught courage through sheer terror. And I am living this moment with you all now. So if I'm not here next Monday, I will have been wheeled away, probably, I hope, to some kind of old 1930s sanitarium. You know those? You watch them in black and white movies. Not a lot of you know, but I was a very severe truant when I was 13 all the way through to 18. And whilst on one level, swings and roundabouts, that's not great for academic acclaim, let me tell you, very few people have as much knowledge of black and white movies from the 1920s onwards, and we're talking silent onwards, as I do. I know all the stars. I know everything from Harold Lloyd to Cary Grant to Fred Astaire, Ginger Rogers. I am the only person who could probably go on a quiz show and successfully navigate only that area because I spent a lot of my life. And one of the things that I used to look at were those sanitariums where they'd just be like, oh, Margaret's having a terrible time. Margaret shall be sent to the sanitarium. And they'd take them to the sanitarium and it looked lovely. She'd usually be on a wicker white chair with a rug, her hair would be perfect, and she'd have a personal nurse. So I'm hoping that should something go awfully wrong on Thursday, I shall be whipped off to a sanitarium. I'll have my hair done in a 1930s strange curl. I'll look prim and proper and be black and white. That will be what happens. But otherwise, I will be here next Monday with tales of terror. Enough of my humour. Let's get back to what this is about. Mental health and how mine's sliding commonly due to abject fear. Hi Emma. Oh, this is a good one to start off. Wow. If there's one thing we can say about my mental health lives, my lovelies, it's that we get a whole range of questions. And also I know that a lot of you who watch this also watch my crime stuff, because sensitive, loving, compassionate people, we like crime for some reason. Not committing it, because we'd hate to get caught. We'd be useless, wouldn't we? You know, if we had to rob a bank, we'd probably leave a how to deal with post-trauma card there and pay for the sessions. We just would never be able to cope. But we like watching crime. And this first question is very related to that. Hi Emma, how do I know if I'm dealing with a psychopath? I know this is so random, but I don't know if it's just the trauma I went through as a child or my partner X I just get really bad vibes. So I don't know whether you're also talking about the fact that you went through trauma as a child and with your partner, who's now an ex, and that you are still dealing with people in your network that you think may have psychopathy as part of who they are. If it's your ex we're talking about, I suppose it really doesn't matter because we're going to cover the same. So, psychopaths. In the normal population, general population, 1% of people are psychopaths. That's a lie. I'd say 3%. And I'd say in males, up to 5%. Not everyone agrees with me. Other views are allowed here. This is still a democracy in my world. So I'll tell you about what the statistics say. 1%, but that is mixed between men and women. And because women are way less likely to be psychopaths as far as serious psychopaths, then it brings averages down. But I would say probably about 3% genuinely of men are psychopaths. However, if you then go into the prison population, so if your ex, for example, has been involved in criminal activity or has ever been to prison, got about 8% of people are psychopaths. And then if you look at violent offenders in prison, 31% are psychopaths. So we get higher and higher and higher. However, you don't have to go to prison and you don't have to be violent and you certainly don't have to be criminal to be a psychopath, because when we're talking about percentages, we're also talking about general population. And in the corporate world, the belief is that in high positions, 20% of people are psychopaths. And to bring that even further into the realms of our day-to-day life, in the 1980s and the early 90s, during the financial crisis, when one would be imagining, what kind of people shall we recruit because we have a financial crisis? One would imagine somebody who's good in a crisis. One would imagine somebody with integrity and honesty, autonomous thinking, but also a willingness to be compassionate to the environment that they're in, and somebody who would not wish to lose or steal money. Correct. But no, they decided to use their hair psychopathy checklist to find psychopaths because they thought that they'd be ruthless, which they were, in capsizing the economy and just stealing a lot of money or just gambling with money. And that, my dears, is how we entered a global depression. So psychopaths, ironically, do very well in the corporate world as well. And I think that when we talk about psychopaths, we often mistake it for this idea of the classic bedwetter, animal torturer, pyromaniac. Now, they definitely exist. That is the McPherson triad. But nonetheless, when it comes down to how do I know if I'm around a psychopath, I would say, apart from the most obvious ones, which is the person likes torturing me, manipulating me, coercively controlling me, making me feel that everything that I do is wrong and everything that they do is right, then on top of that, they may be conning you, which can be anything from love bombing you to a point where you hand over your credit card, through to telling you that you're mad because they'd never have an affair, even though you found sexting on their phones and them on multiple dating sites. So these kind of psychopaths are very common. Another example of a psychopath, and remember we're talking about a spectrum. It's a bit like if I was talking about paedophilia, okay? Right here we have a paedophile who would never molest a child. We'll call them virtuous paedophiles. That might be hard to comprehend, but i.e. a paedophile who knows that to touch a child in any way, shape or form is reprehensible. They feel terrible about it. They know it's not normal. They never act on it. And then we have the narcissistic, psychopathic child molester killer, right? Massive spectrum. Same for psychopathy. So we've got here, I will lie to your face. I will steal from you. I will snipe behind your back. And even though I know that everyone knows that I'm doing it, I don't care because your pain does not register with me. So that's the spectrum that you're looking at. So when you say, like, how do I know if I'm with a psychopath? Well, the bigger question is, if I feel that the person around me is making me think, could you be a psychopath? I think the traits are, it doesn't matter whether they are or not, they ain't a nice person around you. Because for that to even come into the equation, for you to be sitting there and going, could this person be a psychopath? Usually it's your good old gut instinct that isn't always heard by many of us, but giving you a kind of nod and prod. Having said that, we can also acknowledge that defences are a big part of our makeup when we've had things like trauma. So when you have been through traumatic experiences as a child, or if you've had an experience with a very abusive partner, then when anybody replicates a single attribute of that behaviour, understandably, your defence mechanisms may shoot up, and therefore you may go, oh, this person's lied to me once, therefore they must be on the trajectory of that same path as my ex, which wouldn't be fair. Forget whether it's fair or otherwise, it still brings you back to this position, which is, if I am so unsure of relationships and trusting my instincts within these relationships right now, is it right for me to have a relationship? And the answer would be, in my professional opinion and my personal opinion, probably not. It would be better to sit with a therapist and to explore those feelings, because once you can explore them and once you can trust them, then you can get involved in relationships with a more open mind without the traumatic response. Because remember, your brain's just trying to protect you from getting involved in things that could cause you great pain. Psychopaths in the Western-centric model are disgustingly successful. In politics, they are disgustingly successful. In banking, disgustingly successful. Pretty much in every powerful area and arena, they are disgustingly successful. And born but for the wrong postcode and the wrong parents, they would be in a very different situation. Ideally, they would be locked up because they would have acted out on certain impulses that would have meant that they'd be criminalised. But if you're born to the right parents and the right postcode with the right advantages and education, then unfortunately all of those traits that are still damaging and destructive as hell can be lauded over others. And then one of the biggest ironies in research around psychopathy is that around 40% of intensely severe bullying occurs from a minority of people in organisations who are psychopaths, and they also tend to be the last one standing. So, ironically, they get away with it. Crazy. They wouldn't get away with it around me. I have a very good instinct for psychopaths, and I'm very good at snipering them out because I've made it my life's work to do so. Hi Emma, I've been stuck in a psychiatric hospital for the last year. I need a way out. I'm stuck in a room with my own dark thoughts, which isn't helping my mental health in any way whatsoever, but I don't know how to get my section revoked. Any advice would be appreciated. First of all, can't imagine what it would have been like in the last year in a psychiatric hospital, because I imagine that you've had COVID, whatever people want to call it, restrictions. Can't be anything but catastrophic for somebody who's already feeling isolated, sad, depressed. I think you've been let down massively. That's what I think. Not blaming the nurses, not blaming the doctors. I'm sure they don't want to be in that situation either. Just saying, worst thing that you can do to anybody who's already struggling with mental distress is remove them from their support strategy. It seems like a very obvious thing to say. So the fact that you've been left alone with your thoughts means that, as opposed to having that therapeutic real intervention that you require, it's not existed. So I guess part of you is thinking, well, this hasn't worked. All it's done is kept me in a position of stasis. I've not moved on, but at least you've been safe. And I say that, and it sounds glib, because life isn't just about being safe, is it? Like, you can put me in cotton wool right now and not let me out of this house and just feed me by my spoon, and I am safe, but I'm slowly losing my mind, right? So I'm safe. But on the other extreme, if you were put in a mental health unit a year ago, there was a reason for that. And you're still here a year later. So whilst you might not have made the progress and gone through the process that you'd have ideally liked to have gone through, that is not a bad thing that you're still here. However, you're now at a place where you're thinking, well, maybe this isn't going to be as effective for me as it would be if I were to allow myself to think about a world outside of this possibility. Advocacy is what I would look at. So I'm going to presume, because you're online, that you do have access to these resources, but Mind have a whole section on advocacy. And basically, you can get somebody to become your advocate, and they are able to understand your position, help you to navigate and negotiate the legal implications of a section, and also understand the panels that you need to go through to hopefully mean that that section can be lifted. But I'm also going to bring in the fact that I don't know what's going on for you or how safe they believe that you are, because I think sections can feel really, really punitive and punishing. But if psychiatrists and psychologists who are working with you genuinely fear that you might harm yourself when you leave, they are going to keep you under that section until they feel that you've engaged enough and acknowledged enough the seriousness of your needs and worked a program to a point where they feel you can be treated in the community. So you have to also ask yourself those questions. And if potentially you are not engaging because you don't like it, you don't like the environment, you find the therapy sessions scary, you don't like sitting out and hanging out in the rooms which are shared because they can feel like a bit scary, then it could be that that's working against you. So also look at your own behaviour. What control can you have over presenting different elements of your personality and self to the staff around you who are also there with one desire? And they really are. Those staff want you out. They want you out. They want you back out there in your community living your life. That's success. They don't want you stuck in a section unit. Remember that. And sometimes it can be hard too. Stella Haywood is having a bad day. Needs to talk to someone. Okay. So you're in the chat now, Stella. So if anybody here wants to kind of jump on and have a natter with Stella whilst I'm talking, that's great. Secondly, really nice, Stella, that you actually put that there. Thirdly, there are some organisations that it's worth knowing about. SOS is a great charity. The helplines are open. They might be open now, actually. You can call them. It's a real person at the end of a phone, and it's not like the Samaritans. They do chat. It is about having a conversation, and it is about hopefully helping you feel like you are connected to a human being who wants to just share your journey with you. Obviously, as you know, there are Samaritans. There's also Mind, which operates a helpline. I always think that when you're feeling like you want to talk to someone, you really do want to actually talk. But I also appreciate online talking can help as well. There's also the Shout service, which is a text service, which can really, really help. If you were under 25, there's also something called Kooth.com, Kooth.com. They are all possibilities that you can use. And I always think that the hardest part of speaking to a stranger is that first bit where you pick up the phone and you're like, oh, I've got to just say hello. And like, all you have to do is say, hi, I've never done this before. I feel a bit scared or embarrassed or worried I'm wasting your time, and then it'll be fine. Or just have a chat here. But know that when you have a bad day, it's so much better to reach out. Also, I think that when I own my own mental health, me and my husband in the past few weeks have really intensely struggled with the way the world has changed. I think a lot of us are feeling this common experience, and I will describe it as feeling like something has crawled into my throat and is inhabiting from my throat to my solar plexus, as if there is this like suffocating, crushing feeling that freedom as I know it has become bastardized, and what I am told is freedom doesn't feel free anymore, and that what I believe in autonomy, which is I have a right and a choice to make decisions over who I am, what I do, within reason, obviously, are no longer things that people believe I have a right to. So I think that there is a really shared experience at this moment of mental struggle. And I was having a conversation with my brother today about grief, because obviously I entered the pandemic having lost my dad. And when you lose a significant parent or anybody that you love to a traumatic, hideously instant loss, the process of it even becoming real is a long-term process, and there are things that you have to do that you aren't ready for, and then you have to confront, and you weren't ready for, and you have to carry on doing that all the way through. And so we're all going through, no matter who we are, our individual pains within our families, our losses, right through to this connected feeling of this shared experience of loss, and this shared experience of feeling less free, and then an even greater experience of looking at our younger generations and feeling lost for them. And no matter how shared it is, no matter how connected we all are, it feels completely unique to you as a human being. And we don't talk about that enough. And because what we should all be right now is in a field, living in our like cabins together, and probably going and having a bit of a cry in a corner with Sheila and Jane and John, not because they burnt the bread, just because, you know, it's one of them days, and giving us all a hug and just reminding each other that we love each other and we're cared for, you know, because that's how life was meant to be. I'd be foraging for nuts, obviously, and finding it deeply upsetting that I couldn't break a cashew nut with my tooth in the shell. I'd probably be one of those people. But the point is, that's what we're meant to be doing. And instead, we've become more and more and more insular and disconnected and individualised in our thoughts. And so there is this shared loneliness. And I'm saying that because I hear it on a daily level with people that talk to me about it. I see it on a daily level online, and I witness it on a daily level in pretty much every single human I encounter. And even when there are moments of joy, a witnessing of something beautiful or joyful, as opposed to it maybe a few years raising you up, often now it will actually be the thing that brings you down, because there'll be this momentary snapshot of what was, and then a tumbling connection with what is. So when you reach out and say, I'm having a bad day, even though it's globally being experienced by so many, it's also really recognisable that it's individual and unique to experience. So just to honour that. So get the help, reach out, but also understand that there's nothing wrong, even when you get loads of great responses, to still feel that it exists within you, that sadness and that isolation. Just to note. What if I have a concern about someone I care about who is with someone who I believe to be a pathological liar? So a pathological liar is a liar who genuinely has a pathology to lie, which means that it's almost a mindset, a mental illness to some degree, and that to gain a level of control, manipulation, to gain standing, to gain money, to gain whatever it is, the payback, they have to just consistently fabricate. I think we used to call them Walter Mitties when I was young, but it basically means somebody who just says whatever they need to say in the moment to just get whatever they need. And there used to be a character in Catherine Tate, the comedian, and she was a pathological liar. And whenever anybody needed anything, she'd be like, I can do that. And it would be like, you know, a salsa professional competition. And she'd just be on the dance floor looking like a ridiculous, useless dancer. Or she'd agree that she could translate 15 languages and that would be her thing. I can do that. Pathological liars do that. They do whatever it takes to ingratiate themselves to whoever they want in that moment, and they also use it for negativity. So they will just look at you, tell you what you want to hear, even though they're going to get found out in 5 minutes' time, because the consequential thinking isn't there. That, again, on a psychopathy level, is a trait of it. So the Pinocchio effect. But when they're pathological, the issue is that consequential thinking and reaction is irrelevant. So a good one to look at is Dr. Phil. I'm not saying Dr. Phil's a pathological liar, actually, by the way. I'm saying, what does good surgery and money do, though? I mean, he looks 30 years younger than he did when he was 30 years younger. And his wife hasn't aged since about 28. Honestly, just it's worth looking. If you don't watch Dr. Phil, it's just worth looking. And his wife's so tiny as well. She's a tiny lady. And yeah, he was bald with a moustache at 23. So he genuinely looks better than when he was young. That's what money does. But there was a girl in one of his programs, and she has gone through saying she's pregnant the whole time. And he has every bit of evidence to say, you're not pregnant, because on this day when you went for the scan, they said there was no baby. On this day when you went for your obstetric, there was no baby, and so on and so forth. And she just sticks to it. There is no ability to acknowledge the consequence. So in the perfect moment where she could go, I am deeply disturbed, I desperately want a baby, I didn't know what else to say, I lied about the miscarriage, which is what we would consider a cogent, psychologically adjusted, no matter what you've lied about, you know, we can all tell lies, but in the moment of being found out, it makes you go, I did it, I'm sorry, this is why. A pathological liar will be like, no, you're wrong. Like, literally, it'll be like, you know the cake that you said you definitely bought? And you're like, yeah. And, you know, you just said it was on the table? Yeah. And you're like, why is there, like, a kilo of cheese? I'm like, it's a cake. That's the kind of thing. It's a cheesecake. Pathological liar just will not accept it. You know, they are the people who tell 30 friends they're all going to Florida and just keep it up and then just spend all the money and don't go to Florida. So that's how you know that it's more pathological. It seems to be an unending triad about all the things that they are, want to be, have got, and it all turns out to be false, but they're not really bothered. Just carry on. So it's one of those things that almost requires more psychiatric and psychological intervention, because it's about payback. And I know this is one of those things that I've talked about before, but you can't have a liar unless both parties engage. So what amazes me is how so many people know that they're being lied to, and they're just like, oh, just go on with it because it's a bit awkward. It's like if someone lies to you, be like, you didn't say that, and that didn't happen. Also, ideally do it in front of people, because it's really good to get witnesses to that, because that helps to create, even in a non-consequential pathological liar, a resistance to act out in certain scenarios around you at least. So that would be my advice there. Emma, how do I cope waiting for a 2-week doctor's appointment? And even then over the phone, whilst I'm trying to help deal with crippling health anxiety that I've suffered with for 26 years, I'm trying my best not to Google, but it's not happening. I think it's really hard, first of all, because if you have severe health anxiety and then they're like, just wait for a few weeks and then we'll see you by phone, that's not great for you, because you're already dealing with a psychological condition. And then when all you're hearing about is death online and in the news, and you're just getting loads of stories about people dying, you know, 18-year-olds dropping dead of heart attacks and stars dying of early recognised cancer, it's going to be really hard when your GP is like, just hold on 2 weeks, right? And you're going to be like, please don't go for Google. And on one level, I want to say brilliant, because what you're doing there is deciding that the trigger of going on Google is that you'll think, I've definitely got something really serious and I'm probably going to die. You know the cycle. That's what's going to happen. And it's great that you connect with that. Because even though the compulsion exists, the recognition that by avoiding it, you are making sure that you're not going down the rabbit hole. Because remember, I always say this to all of you, don't I? Whoever's got health anxiety on here, Google is the worst place, because you're like, I have a mild pain above my eye. Google, brain tumour, death. Or like, I have a bit of indigestion, pancreatic cancer. I've got a spot, melanoma. It's always there, right? Why? Because they have to, for a liability perspective. So Google aren't actually trying to tell you that there's anything seriously wrong with you, but if they didn't note that there was this like 0.000000001% possibility that that mole on your cheek wasn't melanoma, then you would have a right to say, well, I trusted Google and then they turned out to advise me wrong, and now look at what's happening, right? So you're right to avoid Google. However, it's wrong that your doctors are making you wait 2 weeks, and I would not accept it. And I am one of the most notorious complainers when it comes to the NHS. I am notorious for it. I literally have like vague friends of friends getting in contact to go, please, can you sort me out an appointment? That's how good I am. Because I know that if I ring up and I say it's an emergency, because I think it is, they're going to have to see me. And they're going to have to go, they can be awkward, they can say the doctor's going to ring you, but I'm like, no, it's an emergency. And no, I'm not having a phone consultation. And no, I'm not accepting that. And you're going to be liable. And I'm going to play all those cards. And now I'm going to say, I want to complain to your practice manager, and I'm going to complain to the GMC. I am going to complain. And you know what? Them seeing you is so much easier than dealing with the paperwork of the GMC complaint. And I'm saying that not to be awkward to any GPs, because I don't know, these kind of weird telephone video conversations seem to have been encouraged from somewhere. Certainly doesn't make any sense to me. I don't even like doing Skype therapy because I don't think I can really feel whether the person's in the level of distress that I believe they may be, because it's not 3D. But you can absolutely complain and be an arse. And that's not because I'm trying to make doctors' lives difficult, it's because that's their job. You signed up to be a GP, to sit in front of a person, to listen to their problems, to understand the nuances of their behaviour, and to help them work through whatever it is they're dealing with. And if you feel that you are really scared about something, it doesn't matter what their opinion is, because that is what the patient's charter is about, and that is your right. So I would get on the phone and I would say, it's an emergency. I wouldn't be willing to discuss it with the person on the end of the phone, by the way. I ain't going to be telling a receptionist what my problems are. All they need to know is, I'm in an emergency situation, I need to speak to a doctor. And then I'd get on the phone to that doctor when they ring me and I'd say, I need to come in and see you, I'm not willing to discuss this over the phone. And I would go in. And I'd say, if you don't do that, I'm going to complain. I think that you're putting me in a position of danger. And I would literally do that, because it's not okay that you're being made to wait 2 weeks and that you're being made to feel that your problems are inconsequential where they're very consequential to you. Emma, I'm suffering with PTSD due to a very violent partner, and he is currently now serving time. Since the court case, I've been a complete mess. Is there anything you can advise for me for any help, please? Well, obviously, the one main thing I'm going to advise for you is trauma work, because I think if you had EMDR, and you can get that in the NHS. But if you get an EMDR, that might help. Also, I am not au fait with the criminal injuries side of things. Okay, I'm going to be honest with you. It's legally not my area. But when you have been a victim of quite serious crime and that criminal has been locked away, there is sometimes criminal injuries payment that you can receive. Now, I don't think it's huge. I think it's like £1,000 at most, but that would well pay for your therapy. So I would look into that kind of option. Will you look it up, Pete, and just check the criminal injuries payments that people can sometimes apply for? Again, they have to be sure that you are dealing with that, but it sounds like you've been diagnosed and you are dealing with that, and that might be a way of just putting a claim in, making sure that that claim gives you enough money to go and have some EMDR. And EMDR is great. It can happen very, very quickly for people. I'm talking, 3, 4, 5 sessions, and you may be dealing with a real neutralized trauma, and that neutralized trauma may eventually mean that over a very short period of time, it hasn't cost you too much money and it has reduced some of those feelings, right? The other thing about PTSD is obviously the more that you can practice relaxation techniques, the more that you can enable yourself to decompress and de-stress and learn to trust the body and the self again, the better. So things like informal mindful practice, getting out in nature, getting out in the white light, doing what I'm doing on Sunday, going open water swimming, because I need to do some things that are new, making yourself confront new opportunities that can help rejuvenate and revisit maybe parts of you that you've forgotten because it was abused and it was beaten out of you, but actually that now you can re-engage with. Remember, one of the things that you want is to find new reflections of you that are positive. So that might be doing yoga classes, it might be going to something like Tai Chi, you might want to go and kick the shit out of some kickboxing, but bringing yourself into new domains and dimensions of self can really help as well. But I would look at those criminal injuries payments, because I think that it could just be handy if you can be handed a wad of money. It's not a lot, but it'd be plenty for EMDR. And if you looked at EMDR and you were like, okay, maybe I don't want to just neutralize the trauma. Maybe what I want to do is think more about a bigger picture of trauma. Maybe this is a cycle of trauma I've experienced before and it's a repetitive experience. Then I'd look at something like schema therapy. And again, always going to say this, because you can train in schema therapy without doing loads of therapy. I would look for like a clinical psychologist or a registered psychological therapist, both who are registered and then who have additional training in schema. With EMDR, it's different, because EMDR, I say that, accredited EMDR is different. They will only train you if you're a clinical psychologist or you are an accredited MBACP member, registered psychological practitioner. So they are very, very, very well qualified. So look at the kind of people that you can go with. And even when I said all of that, the most important bit is the relationship. So make sure that whoever you choose to go with, you have a chat with them before. And I know this is going to annoy some therapists and some psychologists, but I think every practitioner should give you like a free 20 minutes. I really do. Like, if I'm going to go to a restaurant, I have an expectation that if I look at your hygiene score, you're definitely going to be above a 4. I might eat a 3 if it's an all-you-can-eat buffet and, I happen to be there with a group of people. But most of the time, I want a 4 or a 5, yeah? So it's the same with practitioners. How do I know? I want to be able to hear that voice. And also, I had this conversation the other day because somebody needs some help. As you know, a lot of people like myself, free speech does not exist in the way that we believe that free speech exists. And also because Twitter exists and people can put in anonymous complaints about people like me to awarding bodies, and that's a big process. People can do that. You realise early on that you have to kind of really learn to explore and express the world around you and within the traumas that you're actually dealing with by kind of observing how the world is interacting with you at this moment in time. And I think with trauma therapy, EMDR and schema and all of these things, those bodies, as much as they can cause us a lot of issues as professionals, are also really helpful for just guiding you down the path of finding the right practitioner. But go for somebody who's free. And I was talking to a barrister the other day who gave me, a considerable amount of time free to speak to one of my friends who's dealing with one of these complaints. And even though they charge like £700 an hour, the fact that that person would do that made me think instantly, that's the kind of person I'd want to work with. So do the same with your therapeutic practitioner and paradigm. Look for someone who'll give you a little bit of time, build a bit of rapport on the phone, and then you might be ready to take it further. So that's what I'd suggest for your situation. Has anyone ever felt like they don't want to be here, but they don't want to die? Like you can switch yourself off temporarily, then come back? Yes. Anecdotally, I have met an enormous amount of people who will often say to me, I just want to cease to exist. They don't want to kill themselves. They don't want to traumatize the people that they love. They just don't want to be. And on one level, we can look at that as an existential crisis, a spiritual awakening, an epiphany. It's a shedding of the old skin and the forming of a new. And it's painful and it's scary, and sometimes the path that we need to take is shaded, and so we fear it. But that desire of not wanting to be is something familiar, because every single one of us on this planet right now once has never been. It's a state you know. So even though we don't talk about that, it's very real. This idea that you're a human being, so you've only ever known what it's like to be human, is a monolithic, Western-centric, agnostic perspective. But I used to never be. I've known that state of being. I wasn't here, you weren't here. So there is a connection with that space and time, as is the connection with this consciousness and being. So I don't think you should be afraid of that not wanting to be, yet choosing to be, because they've both equally played a part in who you are and what you are. And I often think that we lose sight of the very reality of that. And when we die, that state of being, this physical, is something that we move on to. Again, this new state of non-being. But that doesn't mean that there's not a consciousness of that. Just because this body is no longer here, because they've put me in a furnace and I've been popped in a little pot like my dad. That's just this. But my state of non-being, that's always. And what if those remnants of connection with the state of not being and non-being were peaceful and beautiful and transcended all of the issues and problems and feelings that make us so beautifully complex and wonderfully rich, but also so beautifully broken and at times in deep pain. So of course, I think it's an incredibly natural feeling. But instead of seeing it as a sense of, I can't kill myself because of my family and I don't want to be here, but I don't have a choice, maybe it's more of a, remember when we were just not here in this being, and how comfortable and familiar that feels. So like a homesickness that we're both walking towards and have lived within. It's complex being human. And I always say this because some person with too much time on their hands will cut little bits of these videos and send them to my professional bodies to suggest that I'm telling people to think and be a certain way. But my job in these sessions is to just be as present with you as I can be as a human being. And they're my own views and perspectives. And yes, many come from paradigms of intense training over 20 years. Far, far more training than many people will ever have in their lives, and yet I'm still known as a pop psychologist or somebody who just attended some kind of 3-day training session, which is all bollocks. But again, what does it really mean? When it all comes to all, we're just humans, all dressed in clothes in spite of being animals, all trying to work our way best through life. And some of us do that less judgmentally than others. Why do I feel like a bad person the day after drinking? Bloody hell, that's me. Did I write this in? Is this, just let me check the rest of it. Did I write this the other day to myself when I was drunk? Why do I feel like a bad person after drinking? Can't be normal. I know it's the depressant, but I always feel I've done something shameful. I feel shame quite a lot and I can't live my life with it. Honestly, I could write that. So many people could. So why do you feel like a bad person the day after the drinking? Well, because of the fact that you don't actually like the way it makes you feel. So whilst you're drinking, you might enjoy it, but when you wake up the next day, you don't feel that you lived your best life, right? Some people don't feel like that. Some people, they go out and live for a Saturday and Sunday night, they wake up the next morning, have a massive fry up, lie in bed, watch a box set, and are like, bang on, that's for me. And if it is, that is absolutely good enough and as it should be, and you carry on. But for people like me and my husband, when we drink, and we don't go out and drink, we're not drinkers in pubs, we're not drinkers in bars, it's very, very rare, because I don't like to be drunk outside at all. I do think part of that is because I might get arrested or I might get found in compromising positions dancing on tables with no memories. I'm one of those people that's a lightweight with alcohol anyway. But I think it's because when you have a real health conscious mindset, and for me, I have like a really health conscious mindset. So my mind is always constantly working towards self-actualization. And then I have this body that is like, yeah, I'm totally on board, Emma. I like, let's do this. Let's do this open water swimming. Get those kettlebells out. Let's get some salt and pepper chips and a bottle of brandy. Let's do all of it together. And there's that internal conflict where you're like, the open water swimming and kettlebells seems like a very good idea, but why am I eating the salt and pepper chips, and why is there a very expensive brandy in front of me? That's why, because of the internal conflict of wanting to have health and wellness and wanting to have fun and freedom. And we are brought up with shame and guilt for not being perfect. And I can't tell you, by the way, how to achieve that balance. I'm still struggling to achieve that balance myself. So I don't drink in the week, but sometimes I drink at the weekend. And I tend to eat very healthy food, but then there'll be one night where I will definitely get salt and pepper chips because they are the food of the gods. And no one knows how MSG, which is terribly bad for you, can taste so good. It feels unfair. It feels unfair that they can create things that are really bad that taste so good. And also I blame my grandma because she said that brandy cured everything. Like literally, Grandma, I've cut myself brandy. Grandma, I've got a cold brandy. Grandma, I'm being sick. Half a bottle of brandy, it'll sort you right out. And so I was brought up in the 80s where we did that stuff, alcohol on a dummy, it'll get them to sleep. Probably poison them as well. Probably start some latent issues with alcoholism later on. But on a serious note, the shame guilt cycle is choice-based. It's choice-based. So what is best in scenarios like that is when you're not a heavy drinker, when you know that you just do it occasionally to enjoy yourself, but then you're waking up like, oh my God, I'm a terrible human being. You're using the alcohol as a point of self-harm because you want to beat yourself up. It is a self-esteem issue. It is you purposefully and willfully sabotaging the happiness that you had when you were out and having fun because you think that you should be better. And that's because of all those critical voices in the world, and particularly if you're a female, that tell you what you're going to do, where you want to be, what's going to be about your life, why your body's going to look that certain way, and so on and so forth. And all of them, particularly because this is a depressant at all as well, it depresses our system a little bit. Try telling people that when they're dancing on tables. But all of these things, when you're feeling a little bit under the weather, they hit you more. So I think make conscious decisions as to when you are going to allow yourself to be free and fun and frolic with your glass of gin or whatever your thing is, and just really allow yourself to just have that moment, and maybe only do it once a month, and then plan something fabulous for the next day, like an indulgent day of just sleeping and watching box sets and just giving yourself a blowout and ordering a super-sized pizza and just saying all those weeks that I just am healthy and conscious and self-aware. And part of that is also letting loose and being free and just allowing yourself that. Because without that, we are really constricted. And do you want to be constricted? Or do you want to be passionate and free and spontaneous and fun at times? So ask yourself those questions, because right now you're taking guilt and shame and you're using it against you. And it would be far better to just allow yourself to enjoy certain things and work through the guilt and shame and the perfectionistic angle. It's like me. I, at my age now, still want to be able to run 6 miles a day and do my kettlebells like I did 10 years ago. I can't. And I can beat myself up for that, or I can be like, at least I'm still doing them. I'm getting older. It's one of those things. Until somebody comes along with some rejuvenating injection, don't know why they haven't concentrated more on that. That would have been one where we'd have all been lining up, wouldn't we? Take this, you'll be 28 years younger and 33 years organ vital more proficient. Would have all been like, I'm taking that stuff. Actually, if they'd have offered facelifts in a line, I'd have taken that as well. I have been reaching out online to friends, Tiffany Smith, you're online now, about your depression and anxiety for just a chat. And no one rang me back. One person said he'd ring me back last week and he didn't, with no message either. So I'm trying here because I'm heading into a dark place and I'm scared for myself. Well, so Tiffany Smith's online now. So if people can just remind Tiffany that she is absolutely validated and heard. And I'm going to say this, Tiffany. You are not the problem for reaching out. And you are not the reason that your friends didn't respond. People are a bit crap at knowing what to say. It's not your fault. It's not their fault. It's just we do this whole crazy shit with the education system. We go, it's more important for you to learn French at a level you won't even be able to ask for a croissant for when you've finished. Or it's really important that you learn about what a political map is versus a physical map, because we haven't got Google, so we'll spend time in geography or pretty much any lesson because Google exists. So if I really need to work out a difficult equation, I just put it in Google and it tells me. Instead, we make kids do that as opposed to go, oh, what would make a healthy, happy society where, I don't know, we are emotionally literate and able to respond to one another's needs as we once used to when we were, without all of this materialistic, Western-centric bollocks. That's why people don't get in contact with you. It's not that they don't want to help. It's not that they wish they couldn't help. It's that we haven't equipped them to help. I was very fortunate. I didn't go to school from around 13, really. I truanted up until all the way to university, and therefore my education was spent with usually quite a lot of people on the dole who played pool but spoke a lot, because that was what people did. We didn't have phones, so we spoke to each other face to face. And I think that I grew my ability to communicate because of those people, and they had problems. So I was introduced to alcoholics, and I was introduced to drug users, and many of them were still better than me at pool. But those influences influenced me. And then obviously I had to go and see a clinical psychologist because I didn't go to school. So I also got involved with the therapeutic paradigm and recognised that they weren't very good at actually talking to people. And so I had this whole other education, but most people don't, and we don't encourage it. So Tiffany, it's not that you are failing in asking for help, and it's certainly not that you are not deserving of help. It's just sometimes we need to be really specific. And this has been proven in research. It's not enough to say to somebody, and this again isn't a judgment on you, I'm just trying to educate you from the research perspective. So research says, if you say, I'm really struggling, you won't get a response. Or I'm feeling really depressed, the likelihood is the person won't respond. If you say, John, I need you to call me today. Can you make it at 1:15 p.m? And if not, what time suits you? Get them to specifically agree a time. And then at that time, you ring them. And then when you ring them, you just say, I don't expect you to tell me how to feel better. I just need you to listen to me because I'm struggling right now, and I just want to be able to let it go and vent. And if you could just be a hearing ear and be a healing ear, that would be great. When we're specific, when we direct, i.e. we don't scattergun, we specifically request, that person takes more responsibility. And when we define what we require, we get a better response. Also, Tiffany, if you haven't got friends who are emotionally cogent and at your level, you can sometimes overestimate their capacity. I see it constantly. I will work with a 15-year-old whose soul and mind is 78. And they're like philosophizing and expressing these deep feelings of connection that's required. And I'm like, well, they're not going to be in a space where they feel a connection until they're 50. And I have to teach them that they are gifted beyond measure in their emotional empathy and capacity and compassion. And so few people are. And it's not the fault of those who can't give you what you need. It's just that you have more of a knowledge of understanding of emotions, and therefore your expectations of other people's connections with you fall short. Not because they are failing, but because you are further on your interdimensional spiritual journey. That's what happened to me. When I was 12, I was like, how do I bring together your parents in mediation because they're dealing with a divorce? Literally, that was me. I have lived my entire life thinking that everybody saw solutions when other people felt problems. I didn't realise I had this super special gift. And then one day I realised that was it. And I had to wait till I was around 35 before people really took that as serious, because now I was old enough for them to go, oh, I can hear this person. And they were also developed enough for them to have a connection with that person within me. So also know that. Right, I shall see you on the other side, chaps. Everyone, on Thursday, I want you to be thinking about me. 7 p.m. in Newcastle, maybe just me and 6 people, who knows, whilst I deliver a 2-hour serial killer next door tour without crying. Maybe I'll cry, maybe the audience will cry when I collapse on stage and have some kind of cardiac arrest, or maybe they'll jeer, we don't know. I hear Newcastle, have been a few times, wild place, friendly place, very nice crowd. However, I am massively socially awkward and very socially phobic in big spaces. So let's see. Next week you might come and the camera might go on and I might just be like this. And that'll be it. It'll be a catatonic hour. And then Pete will just be behind me, just like rubbing my head, going, she wanted you to know what it was like. But if nothing else, I'm going to be touring the UK and seeing places I've never seen or heard of. So who knows? Housemove could be next. Might be moving to Whitehaven or Belfast. Let's see. But hopefully I will be here most Mondays no matter what. Join me for my crime on Wednesday and Sunday. And if you can make Newcastle, come along so that you can laugh at me, because I haven't even got a new outfit for this. And you know what I look like. I've not got a makeup artist. I'm going to do my own hair. You're getting the real deal. You're getting the YouTube Emma, not the This Morning Emma. Take care, my loves. And remember, keep reaching out to each other. Those people who require it, remember we're a community. And one day, no matter what happens, I sense it. I sense it. I know it's a period right now of some darkness. I know it's a period of aggression and hostility, but I also know it's a period of awakening and consciousness, vibrations at higher levels, and whatever forces are dark, believe me, always balance, and the light is always far brighter. Remember, in the darkest of dark rooms, the tiniest of light is all you need to guide you through. And yet darkness needs consuming, voluminous, pure black. There is nothing else. One tiny, tiny, tiny strand of light beats every single bit and creates vision. And that is what we all have to remember. Take care, chaps. See you.